This is Today as It Happened. Good Monday evening. I'm Holly Furfer, guiding you through our timeline of the day's most important news. From the impact of the partial government shutdown to our deep dive into disturbing diary entries found in the Epstein files. But first, we started the morning with a look at nuclear talks between Iran and the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Budapest today to sign a civilian nuclear cooperation agreement. President Trump has been outspoken in his support for Orban, who faces his most serious election challenge in April. Orban is widely considered Russian President Vladimir Putin's most reliable advocate in the European Union and has maintained warm relations with the Kremlin despite its war against Ukraine. This visit follows Rubio's stop in Slovakia as he works to shore up energy agreements with Central European countries that oppose support for Ukraine. And Rubio's visit comes just a day before U.S. officials are expected to meet with their Iranian counterparts in Geneva for a new round of nuclear talks. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George joins us now live from Capitol Hill. And Joe, very busy White House these days, but a lot happening between the White House and the Middle East. What's the latest on that situation?
Right, and I think this is going to be a week in which we'll be having a number of developments when it comes to the Middle East, whether it's Iran, whether it's later in the week when the president's expected to talk about reconstruction and the rebuilding of Gaza. We'll get to more of that in just a moment. But let's start with Iran and the development that is happening in the next 24 hours, give or take, and that is this meeting between Iranian officials, U.S. officials in Switzerland. We're expecting Oman to once again be the mediators here. Remember, Oman played host to the first meeting less than 2 weeks ago. We're quickly reaching a point where the president's going to have to choose which path in this fork in the road he chooses, right? Does he pursue the military intervention path that could result in more strikes on Iran? Just a few weeks ago, it looked like that was almost inevitable, especially when the president said help is on its way to protesters in the midst of the violent uprising in Iran that resulted in thousands of lives lost. Difficult to get an exact number. Some human rights groups have the total north of 6,000 protesters that were killed in the latest uprising in Tehran and Iran and elsewhere. Does the president pursue military action, or is there more of a diplomatic path? The USS Ford, the Navy's newest, most advanced carrier, has just been ordered by the president to the Middle East, this after serving a number of weeks and months in the Caribbean. They were instrumental in the Maduro operation, Venezuelan operations. Now the president has directed the USS Ford to the Middle East. In naval circles, there's some concern about perhaps some fatigue on the sailors and service members there. Typically travels with around 4,000 or so servicemen and women. It's been a lengthy deployment for the USS Ford as of late, but the president told reporters last week that he's sending the USS Ford to join current military operations in the region just in case there isn't a deal. To paraphrase the president seemed to indicate the USS Ford would be used if there wasn't a deal. So a bit of an ominous warning there by the president. But for the moment, diplomacy is reigning supreme and the possibility for some sort of grand deal. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this over the weekend about the prospects for something to occur between the U.S. and Iran. Take a listen.
We're dealing with radical Shia clerics, okay? We're dealing with people who make geopolitical decisions on the basis of pure theology, and it's a complicated thing. I mean, no one's ever been able to do a successful deal with Iran, but we're going to try.
Some optimism there, but the secretary clearly setting low expectations ahead of this meeting. Watching all of this is Israel and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He was originally scheduled, we thought, to be in Washington this week, moved up his meeting with President Trump to last week. They're obviously watching for any developments on this front. Netanyahu does not want a deal similar to what former President Barack Obama struck now north of a decade ago. Netanyahu was very critical of that deal from former President Barack Obama. Obviously, Netanyahu and Trump have a historically close relationship. Netanyahu said this over the weekend about what he believes any deal should include.
I said that if a deal is to be reached, it should have several components that we believe are important not only for the security of Israel, but for the security of the world, the United States, the region, the world. The first is that all enriched material has to leave Iran.
Any bill would need to include the easing of sanctions and economic penalties that have been imposed on Iran in recent years by various world leaders. So we shall see what Tuesday brings, what Switzerland brings, Holly. Again, are we closer to peace or a deal with Iran by the end of the week? Or potentially the opposite, which could involve military intervention. I mentioned it's a busy week for the Middle East and President Trump. The president took to Truth Social over the weekend to announce a summit, a gathering of his new Board of Peace initiative. It'll take place a little bit later this week. The president believes that this Board of Peace, which the global community still has many questions about, you don't have your traditional allies, members of this group from France or Germany or the United Kingdom. There's Middle East monarchs that are part of this group, some that have closer ties to the Kremlin part of this group. But the president announcing that the Board of Peace will be holding a gathering later this week in Washington. They'll be announcing billions of dollars raised, committed to rebuilding Gaza, which human rights groups and international groups like the United Nations estimate may cost $70 billion to rebuild. And that number may be a guesstimate at best here. So the president's got eyes on Iran, eyes on rebuilding Gaza. We'll see what this shortened week in Washington brings. It is a federal holiday after all, and President's Day.
Now let's take a quick look at some of the other major headlines from today. Today is President's Day, a time to honor America's previous commander-in-chiefs. The federal holiday means that post offices, banks, and the stock market and most schools are closed. Federal, state, and local government offices, as well as the courts, also closed. The holiday was originally established in 1879 on February 22nd, which is George Washington's birthday. But it was moved to the third Monday in February in 1971. Well, it might be time to break that piggy bank. The Wall Street Journal reports a number of companies are raising prices once again. Many retailers cite pressure from tariffs. Some small businesses say they're also grappling with wages and high health care costs, since they have tighter margins than larger companies. Some retailers also increased prices last year after new tariffs took effect. Searchers in Michigan have located the wreckage of a steamer that sank more than 150 years ago. 80-year-old Paul Ehorn discovered the Lac La Belle in Lake Michigan after spending 65 years looking for it. He says a clue from a fellow wreck hunter and an author named Ross Richardson led him to that location. Most of the 53 people aboard the luxury steamer made it to safety when the ship sank in 1872. There are up to 10,000 undiscovered shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. And in sports, once a winner, always a winner. Michael Jordan is now a Daytona 500 winner. The NBA Legends racing team driver Tyler Reddick won the Great American Race Sunday with a last lap pass at Daytona International Speedway. And Michael Jordan celebrated with his team in victory lane, bear-hugging Reddick and jointly hoisting that trophy. By the way, Jordan's team co-owner, Denny Hamlin, finished 31st in his bid to become just the third driver to win 4 Daytona 500s. While diplomats in Geneva and Abu Dhabi talk about ending the war between Russia and Ukraine, a different battle on Ukraine's streets is intensifying over who will fight it. Senior international correspondent Jason Bellini reports from Kyiv on what Ukrainians are calling bussification.
Holly, one word explains what's breaking in Ukraine right now: bussification. When enlistment officers grab men off the street, take their phone, throw them in a van, buses, 1 month training, and then there's a strong chance that they end up here. Yesterday in Odessa, civilians fought back. Tear gas against the officers, chemical burns to the cornea, multiple hospitalized, authorities vowing harsh punishments. Consider this. Ukraine's new defense minister recently disclosed the numbers: 200,000 soldiers AWOL, 2 million evading service. The other day, I met a young Ukrainian who spent the past 2 years in hiding. Igor, we'll call him. Caught once, he managed to escape. He fears that getting caught again would be a likely death sentence. Igor thinks Zelensky should take Putin's deal, give up the Donbass. That appears to be a minority position in this country. To be sure, Ukraine inflicts more casualties on Russia than Russia does on Ukraine, but war consumes bodies, and an underground is fighting to not fight, believing it's time to accept even an unjust peace. A viewpoint not voiced publicly very often because those who feel it most strongly, they're not out in public. Holly?
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
Buried deep in the millions of files released by the Department of Justice on its investigations into Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell is the diary of a young girl. It's her story of what's happening to her in real time, in graphic detail.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's continue our walkthrough of the day's top headlines. Attorney General Pam Bondi is telling Congress over the weekend that the Justice Department has released all relevant records it has in its possession. But those leading the charge on the Epstein files say millions of files have not been produced, and details of what survivors endured are still coming to surface. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live in New York with the latest. And Alex, I mean, you have covered this from the beginning and you've been combing through all of these files. And now you say you see disturbing emails from the adults here, but we really haven't seen much from survivors themselves. One chilling document you found gives us a window. What did you see?
Well, Holly, it was buried deep into these files, millions of files. We found the diary of a young girl. Now, inside of these files, we can see what is happening to her in real time. And I want to warn our viewers, what they are going to see in terms of the content here is incredibly disturbing.
I can't go to school like this. Those are words written by a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, pouring her heart onto the pages of her diary. The girl fills pages with trauma and poems, but also high school graduation cards, a stark contrast of a childhood interrupted by violence.
I think the diary was one of the most striking pieces of evidence that I've come across in the probably tens of thousands of pages of the Epstein files that I've reviewed thus far. I found it incredibly disturbing.
Eliza Orlins, a career public defender who has been poring over millions of Epstein files, says this diary stands out. The dozens of diary pages made public focus on the repeated abuse the girl was enduring, including multiple pregnancies. In real time, she gives excruciating details of going through childbirth, with Ghislaine Maxwell allegedly in the room, and of her baby, born alive, being taken away. She asks herself, why didn't I close my eyes fast enough? Maxwell, she explains, said to close my eyes and put her hands over my eyes. I can't bring myself to write what happened, the girl writes in code in a separate entry. I'm beyond broken. I only got 10 to 15 minutes to hold and feed her before they took her. She is mine. I want her back. Distraught. She glued an image of a sonogram to the same undated page and refers to multiple pregnancies. Tomorrow is the halfway ultrasound for Jeffrey. This one stuck. After they took the first baby who survived in the early miscarriage, I think it was called, I no longer feel like a person, but a vessel. Will they take this one too? In the style of teenage girls who use magazine clippings to make posters for their bedroom, this girl is gluing words to describe her abuse.
She was basically a sex slave. She was put through forced birth. She was put through so much trauma and horror.
The pages filled with prayers begging to be released from this torture and hell. To date, there are no known related investigations or charges.
We all should be screaming and yelling and talking about why there weren't investigations, why there weren't certain searches, why prosecutions weren't brought, why sweetheart deals were given.
And Holly, we do not know what happened to the baby or who the father technically is.
Wow. Has the Attorney General, anybody in the DOJ, said that they're following up on this to talk to that survivor to find out who these men were?
Not that we have heard. Look, every survivor that I've spoken with has said that they would like to be interviewed by the DOJ, but has not been. Again, we don't technically know who this survivor is, but as far as we know, there hasn't been any follow-up on this particular story.
And Alex, the Attorney General also named some pretty prominent people in her letter to Congress over the weekend, also put in some red herrings in there. Will this help identify any of those potential perpetrators of these crimes? Could they use this as a launching pad to try to figure out not only who these men were in this particular girl's diary, but with all of the young women?
Look, I think you hit the nail on the head there about the red herrings. I mean, if you look at this list, it names every living president, even though there is no connection really to Jeffrey Epstein by many of those presidents, including President Bush, President Obama, even President Biden, has not been connected in the same way that we have seen former President Clinton or President Trump connected to Epstein. And there are names of dead people as well, including Ronald Reagan, the first President Bush, as well as Princess Diana. You've got other celebrities like Cher named, other political figures, again, no longer alive, Fidel Castro. And so there's a lot of confusion about how people made the list here. According to Congresswoman Nancy Mace, she said there are names missing from this list because in theory it was a list of people who made the files in one way or another. And Congressman Ro Khanna said that this is really just muddying the waters on this issue, and it really doesn't point people in any direction to really who the perpetrators of these crimes are.
Absolutely. When you've got names like Janis Joplin and Elvis Presley in there, it seems a little impossible that these are somebody directly related to what was going on. And Alex, do we know if there are any more files? As Ro Khanna is saying, this is not all of them, but the DOJ says, nope, this is all of them. So now what happens?
Well, that's the big question, I think, because there's this discrepancy between the two sides. The DOJ saying that, there's nothing left to give, which we heard from Todd Blanche the day that those files dropped a couple of weeks ago. But Congressman Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, they have been adamant that there are some 3 million files that they still have not gone through. And again, when I'm speaking to survivors about this, some of them know that there are pieces of their own stories that have not yet been made public. And so therefore their question is, well, where's that information about my story? And so this is going to be an incredibly complicated situation as the congressmen try to pull these details out from the DOJ if the DOJ is saying that they have nothing left. And by the way, even in this letter that the Attorney General wrote, she says that they redacted appropriately, and we still know that victims' names were identified, and we also know that there's still no context by every single redaction. And so there was a lot of context missing. I mean, you look at this letter that she sent, there's no context for any of these names. You look at the redactions that we've seen on the pages that have been released, there's no context for what the files are, how they were categorized, or why people's names were redacted.
So many questions left hanging here. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live for us. Thank you, as always, for your extensive reporting on this important topic. Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
I'm John Matarese. The average new car now costs $49,000 in 2026. I'll show you how you can get a great deal on a great new vehicle and not pay that average price.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's return to our briefing of today's top stories.
Former President Barack Obama wants to make it clear that he's, quote, never seen an alien. That comes after comments he made on a podcast went viral over the weekend. Speaking to host Brian Tyler Cohen, Obama answered a question about aliens by saying, quote, they're real, but I haven't seen them. He went on to say that only way they are being held is if it's so secret, even the president doesn't know. Social media went nuts, and now Obama is clarifying. He said what he meant was that he personally believes the odds are good that there are aliens out there somewhere.
The first month of this year, the average new car buyer spent $49,000 on their new vehicle. But with the right car at the right price, experts say you don't have to pay the average price.
Saw this blue Jeep and just completely fell in love with the color.
Caitlin Fields hoped for a better deal on her Jeep by not waiting for spring.
People are probably looking for cars more in the springtime and the summer.
She made the right call. For some of the do's and don'ts of car buying, we went to Graham Weiler of Jeff Weiler Nissan.
Right now, Nissan is offering $3,500 off.
Weiler says do shop soon. Inventory is high in the winter and dealers need to hit sales goals. He says do think about offering your old car as trade-in, with used cars getting top dollar, but know what your car is worth.
If you have a vehicle that's 3 or 5 years old, right now is the best time to trade it in.
Do consider buying new. New car rates are much lower, but don't finance more than you can afford. According to Kelley Blue Book, the average new car buyer paid more than $49,000 in January. For many buyers, that means taking out longer loans.
Anybody who's financing a car for 72 or 84 months, that's a good sign that you picked a car that's too expensive for your budget.
Kelley Blue Book's Brian Moody recommends financing a car that's within the warranty period.
That way you're not on the hook for payment and repairs should that come up.
Kelley Blue Book recently highlighted several new cars and trucks in the $25,000 to $35,000 range, like the Ford Maverick, Honda Civic, and Nissan Leaf. So don't get discouraged by the average car price. Field says she got a good price by shopping before the spring crowds, and she's now trading in her old beater.
Bye-bye.
A great time to get a great deal so you don't waste your money. John Mattery, Scripps News Group.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
We now know just how much money two companies were able to make by locking up suspected undocumented immigrants. I'm Scripps News investigative reporter Patrick Terpstra. Ahead, the latest in our ICE Inc. Scripps News investigation.
Glad you're back with Today as It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So why don't we pick up right where we left off?
Let's get you caught up on some of today's top stories. Opening statements have begun in the Georgia trial for Colin Gray. He's a father whose teen son, Colt Gray, is accused of the 2024 mass shooting at a high school outside of Atlanta. Prosecutors allege that Gray allowed his son to access a firearm and ammunition, despite warnings that his son could harm others. But his lawyers argue that that's simply not true.
The courtroom is not a place where we punish people because we're angry, where we punish people because we're grieving. It's not a place where we punish people because we feel someone has to pay. This is a place where we follow the law. And the law requires proof, and the law requires evidence.
2 students and 2 teachers were killed in the Appalachia shooting, and 9 others were hurt. Gray has pleaded not guilty to the nearly 30 charges, including murder and manslaughter. The trial is part of a broader push to hold more people accountable for school shootings. That includes parents. The search is on for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. The mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie disappeared more than 2 weeks ago in what investigators are calling a kidnapping. Right now, the FBI is analyzing DNA from a glove found near her home. The glove appears to match those worn by a suspect captured on a doorbell camera. Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie made another emotional appeal on social media Sunday for information about her mother's whereabouts. And 2 corporations saw a banner 2025 as a direct result of President Trump's immigration crackdown. CoreCivic and Geo Group owned private detention centers that house migrants arrested by ICE. Our ICE Inc. ongoing investigation tracks how for-profit businesses are cashing in on mass deportations. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra is live with us in our D.C. newsroom. So, Patrick, these 2 private detention companies are making investors happy for now. What more can you tell us?
Well, 2025 was great for CoreCivic and the Geo Group. Those are the 2 big companies that have detention centers that house immigrants. And as they look to 2026, they're making clear that they also see some more gains to be had. We are talking about both companies clearing $2 billion. That's according to the 2025 earnings calls that both companies had last week. And as a result of that, hundreds of millions of dollars can be attributed directly to new contracts with ICE. A lot of that money coming from Congress over the summer from the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. And they have had these contracts for quite some time. Over the course of the past year, they've opened up a combined 9 new detention centers all over the country. And they have really made it possible for ICE to actually make all of these arrests and to detain immigrants who then go into this deportation process that is becoming more and more familiar to folks. And this is something that can take months to play out, so they end up locked up for quite some time. What we did not hear on these earnings calls was really any of the findings that we have made about concerns that these are understaffed facilities, that sometimes the medical care is lacking, there's not edible food, drinkable water, as you might expect, of the highest quality, and especially when it comes to the Dilley Detention Center. This is a place that doesn't just house adults, it also houses children. 2,400 beds inside Dilley, run by the CoreCivic company. And CoreCivic mentioned Dilley in its quarterly call in talking about all the gains they have made, that this is really a centerpiece of that CoreCivic facility. They go out of their way to say that they do believe that everyone is treated with care and that that is a priority, but they don't mention the measles outbreak that occurred there as they're talking to investors and saying that this has been just a huge boon for them in 2025. And as they look ahead to 2026, they're talking about the possibility of opening more idled facilities. Both GEO Group and CoreCivic, they still have jails, and some of them are actually from the Bureau of Prisons. These are very high security facilities that they want to open. They say that they have the capacity to house thousands more immigrants. This is the CEO for CoreCivic speaking to investors.
As that ecosystem grows, it's going to result in additional bed demand. It has been slower than I think some thought might occur, but certainly when you take a step back at the 30,000 foot level and look at the magnitude of scale that's already increased, as well as the timing of when the additional enforcement infrastructure was put in place, one can reasonably expect you would see continued growth.
And the reason they're talking about continued growth is the immigration detention push shows no sign of abating. Keep in mind, the Trump administration said that the goal is to detain 100,000 immigrants, or at least to be able to detain that number. Again, the real goal is to have those folks deported that are in the country illegally. Right now, though, they are short of that goal of detaining 100,000 immigrants. They have locked up 70,000. That is still a record number, but it shows you that the administration sees room for growth and they have the money to be able to actually contract with companies like CoreCivic and GEO Group. Those companies, by the way, also making clear they're not just investing in these new detention centers. They are also looking at ankle monitoring services, contracts with ICE to monitor immigrants who have been allowed to go home, and also something called skip tracing. This is a controversial practice where ICE actually will be paying companies to surveil immigrants at home and at work who ICE believes to be in the country illegally. So more contracts, more money for these companies. Andrew?
Yeah, and Patrick, what about this idea that ICE is pursuing about using warehouses to hold immigrants?
Yeah, that really has generated a lot of interest in recent months. The Trump administration, we know, is now canvassing the country for warehouses that they might be able to convert into ICE detention centers. But listening to CEO George Zoley from the GEO Group, this is someone who's been doing this for decades and decades. He told investors he's not so sure that this plan really is going to work, at least to the extent that the Trump administration is thinking, talking about in some sites housing thousands upon thousands of immigrants in warehouses, saying that security is really a big challenge. These companies, for right now, they want to reopen facilities that they already have before they start looking at warehouses, but that is still something certainly that is on the table for 2026, something we will keep watching as part of our ICE Inc. investigation. Andrew.
All right, Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra for us. Thank you for your extensive reporting.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
TSA agents now working without pay as the partial government shutdown continues. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. How this could impact your next trip, coming up.
Thanks again for joining us on Today's It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Minnesota investigators are requesting information and evidence from the federal law officers in the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. He's that ICU nurse shot and killed by a Border Patrol agent in Minnesota. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett is in our D.C. newsroom. She joins me now. Avajoy, a county attorney in Minnesota has already asked the federal government to turn over information in one fatal shooting. Is there reason to believe this request will be different?
Not so far, according to this county attorney. Her name is Mary Moriarty, and I actually spoke with her about this matter just a few weeks ago, and she is not hopeful that the federal government will be handing over the information that she needs. We're talking about two high-profile cases here in the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, two separate instances where people died after encounters with federal agents in the state of Minnesota. Now, this local county attorney, she believes there's a possibility that there could be enough evidence for them to bring charges against federal officers. And this is why they have asked the federal government to share information with them, share whatever evidence they may have, so that this county attorney could then go ahead and make a decision on whether she should file charges against these agents or not. And you're looking at some of the pieces of evidence that she has requested. She has asked for all physical evidence, such as firearms, cartridge casings, uniforms of officers who were involved in these cases, and then also videos and photographs recorded by federal agents. Even if these pieces of video were on their personal cell phones, names of all of the federal agents and officers involved in the shooting, and medical records for agents or officers for any injury related to the shooting. Now, this is the request that was sent over in the Renee Good case. We are anticipating that another request will be sent over in Alex Preddy's case. Remember, they were killed about 3 weeks apart. So this new request for Alex Preddy is expected to be sent over, according to Mary Moriarty's office, sometime later this week. But in my conversation with the Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, she told me that she's just not hopeful that the federal government will be sending over this information, but that's not stopping her from asking for it. Take a listen to what else she told me.
I don't necessarily think it's a barrier that we're not going to get evidence that the feds have. I'm hopeful that we will be able to have enough information to make a decision, and by that I mean charges or not, and then describe the evidence that we have and why we made that decision.
Okay, so that leads to my next question. Will you bring charges against the federal agents involved in both of these incidents, and even that third one that was non-fatal?
Yeah, I can't say right now.
So that was my conversation with regards to the Renee Good case. Now we know that that same office, Mary Moriarty's office, will be making a request to the federal government, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security sometime later this week for similar pieces of evidence in the Alex Preddy case. What we can tell you also is that there is this investigative unit within the state of Minnesota. It's known as the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And just over the weekend, the BCA, as they're known, they said that they received a response from the FBI saying that the FBI will not be handing over key pieces of evidence that the BCA requested. The BCA works hand in hand with the county attorney's office to gather evidence, and that is when they will decide whether or not they will file charges against one or more than one officers. So that is a new piece of information that we're now getting, is that the BCA says that they have gotten a response from the FBI saying that the FBI will not be handing over certain pieces of evidence. You heard from Mary Moriarty. She said all along that she was not confident that they would be able to get the evidence that they needed, but that is not stopping her from making this request. And in our interview, she also said they oftentimes go to trial and they don't have all the pieces of detail that they need, but that doesn't really stop them from being able to forge ahead with the possibility possibility of filing charges, but you also heard her say she's not certain that they will be filing charges in this case. They will allow the investigation to run its course. Andrew?
All right, Avajoy Burnett for us in our D.C. newsroom, our legal affairs correspondent. Avajoy, thank you. Well, breaking news at this hour, Oscar-winning actor and star of the Godfather films, Robert Duvall, has died.
I always wanted to be thought of as a brother by you, Mikey, a real brother.
According to a statement from his family, he died peacefully at his home with his wife, Luciana, by his side. Duvall had an acclaimed career that spanned 6 decades. He was best known for The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and many other tough guy roles. The family said those who wish to honor his memory are encouraged to do so in a way that reflects the life he lived, by watching a great film, telling a good story with friends, or taking a drive in the countryside to appreciate the world's beauty. Duvall was 95. And Lunar New Year celebrations kick off Tuesday as the Year of the Horse begins. Billions of people worldwide will join 15-day Spring Festival. It's widely considered the most important event of the year in China and the Chinese communities around the world. Celebrations vary depending on the country or region, but there are a few common traditions. Some of them include a big dinner with family, cash gifts in red packets for kids, and deep cleaning the home to get rid of any bad luck from the past year. And right now, hundreds of thousands of people are working without pay due to that partial government shutdown. That includes TSA workers, FEMA, the Coast Guard, and the Department of Homeland Security. Scripps News Washington correspondent Steph Liebergen joins me now live. And Steph, the shutdown started Saturday, so what's the latest of this hour?
Around 95% of TSA agents are deemed essential, so they're told to keep working during a government shutdown. But as we saw in the fall, the longer this shutdown lasts, the bigger the impact will be. It's business as usual at airports across the country, but behind the scenes, about 61,000 TSA employees clocked into work not knowing when they'll get paid. Last week, Congress failed to approve funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which includes TSA. Democrats are demanding changes to immigration enforcement after the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minnesota last month. Many TSA employees, though, are still feeling the impacts from the last government shutdown. A top official told Congress the agency lost over 1,000 agents in October and November last year, many of them attributing their departure to the 43-day government shutdown.
Many were subject to late fees from missed bill payments, eviction notices, loss of childcare, and more. Some are just recovering from the financial impact of the 43-day shutdown. Many are still reeling from it.
TSA is focusing on surge staffing as big events like the World Cup come to the U.S. But with yet another shutdown, those efforts could be severely impacted. Luckily for travelers, air traffic controllers are not affected by this shutdown. That means widespread flight delays and cancellations are unlikely. But travel experts say passengers won't be immune to disruptions.
The longer the shutdown lasts, the theme then becomes there could be operational issues in the way of longer security processing, as we see the TSA agents call out, take some time off.
Negotiations to end the DHS shutdown are happening behind closed doors, and Congress is on recess until February 23rd. But if the two sides strike a deal before then, we could see lawmakers called back to Capitol Hill. Because of a 2019 bill signed into law during President Trump's first administration, furloughed and essential employees like TSA agents will receive back pay once Congress approves a budget for DHS. But a delayed paycheck can still put families in a tough financial position when their bills keep coming in. Stephanie Liebergen, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
In just the past week, some of the top safety researchers at the world's most powerful AI companies have walked away from their jobs, including at OpenAI and Anthropic, and they're not leaving quietly.
That story is right after the break. Watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News recap of the day's biggest events. So let's dive right in.
AI companies are facing a shakeup at the top research ranks with high-profile departures at both OpenAI and Anthropic over the last week. This highlights growing tensions over safety, ethics, and the pace of development. Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett is live for us in Denver. And Maura, researchers are publicly raising alarms about where this technology is heading. What are some of the things that they are most concerned about?
Yeah, Andrew, this has been an interesting situation to watch unfolding just over the last several days and hitting very influential companies like OpenAI and Anthropic. And all of this is just kind of raising new questions about how people are squaring the work of this really quickly evolving technology. At OpenAI, former researcher Zoe Hitzig announced her departure in a guest essay in the New York Times. She warned that she's worried OpenAI is making similar mistakes that we saw Facebook did about 10 years ago when it comes to advertising. She wrote that building an advertising business on top of an unprecedented, quote, archive of human candor, from people sharing medical fears to deeply personal thoughts, she says that this could create incentives to shape user behavior in ways that we don't have the tools to understand, let alone prevent. And then she went on to write that the erosion of OpenAI's principles to maximize engagement may already be underway. Meanwhile, over at Anthropic, the head of the Safeguards research team also resigned, posting a letter on X where he wrote, "The world is in peril." His message wove a broader existential concern. He emphasized in the note, too, though, that it had become increasingly difficult to let organizational values truly govern actions. He went so far as to saying he's going to take a poetry class and become, quote, invisible for a bit. And so I think that just highlights the severity in which people who are faced with the real safety concerns internally at these companies may be feeling. And so all of these, too, though, are in tandem with departures from XAI, some other AI companies we've seen, X specifically facing backlash over its Grok chatbot, because you might remember the criticism of its ability to create and publish pornographic images, as well as those anti-Semitic comments that we've seen from the chatbot. And so all of this really just points to the imbalance, the growing discontent inside AI labs, who are tasked with balancing long-term safety, while also the company, the business side, has all this pressure to monetize and to ship products out and get these powerful tools in the hands of users that might be paying for it. And so these researchers are saying that these ethical guardrails might just be being weakened as the tech becomes more and more deeply embedded, more relied upon by consumers. And so there's a lot of concern internally at these AI companies that in tandem, in addition to those concerns, that the AI systems are getting smarter faster than initially realized, which means that the job replacement concern is also a reality across industries. And so there's a plethora of issues that these safety researchers are considering as they're speaking out against what these AI companies are doing, Andrew.
Yeah, fascinating to see where this industry goes over the next few months, years, and longer. Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett for us. Maura, thank you.
Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us here at Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a wonderful Monday night.